Hey good people, and welcome to the channel. It's Wednesday, and you already know what time it is. In a few moments, you'll get to hear my thoughts and feelings on episode 5 of Married at First Sight Boston. By now, we already know that this season is a joke, and this episode further cements the show's descent into the realm of Jerry Springer. But I shall continue to review the show nonetheless. I will say that unlike last episode, this episode doesn't spend the first 20 minutes on recycled footage and commercials before getting into the meat and potatoes of what the episode was about, and I appreciated that. But without any further delay, let's jump into the review. Let's start things off by talking about Mark and Lindsey. After they wake up from a night of peace and tranquility, Lindsey is shown hugging up on Mark, and it looks like she might be naked. When the producer asks Lindsey if she consummated her marriage, she starts to laugh and act real goofy, which in the land of nonverbal communication means that Mark the Shark gave Lindsey that good old pickle tickle. Which in my opinion is a very good thing, because the more act right that Lindsey gets on the honeymoon, the more likely she'll behave in front of the other couples. But as Mark and Lindsey are talking, Lindsey suggests that they start the day off by making pina coladas. Mark is down for making drinks with his wife, but he doesn't want Lindsey to get too liquored up and act a fool in the process. We then get a scene of Mark and Lindsey learning how to make pina coladas. Mark is given the opportunity to make one on his own, and it was nice to see his sense of humor shine during the scene. And while they have drinks, they talk about their dating history. Lindsey shares that the men that she typically dates are engineers and they were never any good to her. Mark shares the troubles that he has encountered while dating, one of which involved a woman who constantly drank too much and acted a fool afterwards, which could be foreshadowing what would happen between him and Lindsey if things continue to go down their path. Lindsey acknowledges that Mark is a people pleaser and she admires him for it. Next there's Jasmina and Michael. When they wake up, Michael serves Jasmina breakfast in bed. And by breakfast in bed, I mean it's a plate of fruit and some toast. And I still gotta ask, where are the eggs, the pancakes, Belgian waffles, corned beef hash, bacon and sausage? But I digress. Much of the time during the early scenes are centered around Jasmina feeling that Michael overthinks things, and Jasmina's trying to understand where Michael's coming from, without letting Michael know that she's judging every word that comes out of his mouth. And through their conversation, I can see that Michael takes a very analytical approach when dealing with conflict, while Jasmina approaches conflict with feelings and emotions, which can be said a lot about men and women in relationships. After breakfast, Jasmina and Michael chill by the pool, and instead of talking about something productive, Jasmina rehashes Michael's issues with being negative. At this point, I can already tell that Jasmina Hart isn't into the process, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but she comes off as a nicer version of Alyssa. I went into the season thinking that Michael would run away from the marriage at the first sign of trouble, but Jasmina is giving so many red flags, I think it would be best for Michael to find somebody else at this point. But next up are Alyssa and Chris. Now of course they wake up in separate rooms, and Alyssa's telling the producers that she hoped that she had been spending the honeymoon with her husband. However, we know that's a lie because she's the one who wanted to keep Chris at bay because she didn't want to be in the same room as him. And what I'm now noticing, as many people have probably already noticed, is that Alyssa is extremely delusional in that she has to know that she's shallow, but she makes up the narrative in her head that allows her to be shallow and be a victim while painting Chris as the boogeyman. Even Stevie Wonder can see that this woman is pretty nutty. But of course, Chris wants to continue the process and exhaust every opportunity to make this marriage work. And while I commend Chris for being optimistic, this is one situation that he needs to leave expeditiously. But Chris and Alyssa meet up to go paddleboarding, and they essentially do this activity for filming purposes, because Alyssa was trying to swim away from Chris the entire time, while Chris was trying to make an impression on Alyssa. After their activity, they have a chance to talk one-on-one, and Alyssa reveals that she has consulted with a psychic about her future husband, and she put all her faith into the psychic. Now Chris, being the MVP that I know him to be, asked Alyssa if the psychic told her what her husband would look like, and Alyssa replies that the psychic said that her husband would have pretty eyes and have a needle tattoo. Chris doesn't blatantly laugh in Alyssa's face, but I knew exactly what he was thinking in that moment. We then get to Steve and Noi. They are continuing to have a strong physical and emotional connection, but they are starting to realize some of the differences between the two of them. For example, Steve loves to go camping, and Noi hates the idea of camping. They also both have a long drawn-out conversation about the topic of pooping around each other. One interesting point during the scene is that Noy reveals to the producers that she's starting to fall in love with Steve. And only after 3 days of knowing the man, this can either be considered genius on the part of the experts or insanity on the part of Noy. But Noy takes it upon herself to tell Steve how she's feeling. And in my opinion, Steve replied the way any guy who hasn't slept with a woman he just knew for 3 days would. Steve's reply causes Noy to pause and give Steve the side eye. And just like that, whatever chances that Steve had of giving Noy that pickle tickle that night vanished instantly. Finally, we have Elijah and Katina. They seem to have a good sense of humor, but they were talking about some of the same things that they discussed the previous 2 episodes. Later on in their scenes, Elijah invites Katina out for a workout. And during this time, Elijah is acting like a drill sergeant more so than her husband, which was very uncomfortable and awkward to watch. Towards the first hour mark of the episode, all the couples go on a boat trip to an island, and as they're sitting around as a group, the conversation of who consummated their marriage pops up, and surprise, surprise, only Mark and Lindsey give hints that they got it on. After they arrive at the island, the men break off in their group and the women break off in their group. Steve tells the guys that he was scared of his wife slowly falling in love with him, and Elijah admits to intentionally being hard on Katina during the workout because he wanted to see if she could speak up for herself, to which I had to shake my head on that. Mark is voicing his concerns about Lindsey's behavior and how it may be too much for him. The women are then talking, and Alyssa vaguely talks about her situation with Chris before changing the subject. Katina and Lindsey then get into an argument over what happened on the plane, and during this time, Katina gets everything off her chest about Lindsey. And while she's saying a lot of truthful things, I don't think that this particular place and time was the best place for her to reveal it to Lindsey. When all the couples get back on the boat, they play the game Never Have I Ever, and it turns out that Jasmina got arrested in high school. Also seems like a bunch of people on the show have cheated on one of their partners in the past. Elijah then voluntarily admits to sleeping with a mother and daughter, and everyone on the boat gives him the side eye. But instead of reading the room, Elijah then asks the group if they would be open to a threesome with their current spouse. And all the husbands kept their mouths shut, but not Elijah. He dug his grave even deeper. Later that night, Steve and Noy have dinner, and they talk about the positives and negatives that they learned about one another in their experience thus far. Steve brings up the scene from earlier, and he lays out his case for why he didn't tell Noy that he fell in love with her, to which I gotta agree with Steve. Very few people can authentically claim that they fell in love with somebody only after knowing them for 3 days. Now, before Jasmina and Michael have their dinner, Jasmina has an interview with producers where she reveals that Michael wanted to talk to her about cutting him off while they were on the boat trip and talking about who consummated their marriage. According to Jasmina, Michael wanted her to apologize for cutting him off. Jasmina didn't feel like she did anything wrong, and she describes Michael as being aggressive with his words, and she didn't appreciate his tone. She was annoyed and upset, and she doesn't tolerate being disrespected. Later that night, they have their dinner, and they talk about the issue at hand. And the meat and potatoes of their argument centers around the concept of somebody saying, quote, "I'm sorry you feel that way" as an acceptable apology. And in my opinion, you might as well tell somebody to kiss your butt if you're going to give them that apology. However, Jasmina felt that it was an acceptable apology, and Michael agrees to disagree. What I found interesting in this scene was that when Jasmina told Michael how his words made her feel, he gave her an authentic apology without telling her that he was sorry how she felt. After the apology was given, Michael asked Jasmina if she was bothered by the situation, and she replies by claiming that she has to believe what he says until he shows her differently. But even Stevie Wonder knows that Jasmina is somebody that holds on to things and continues to prove that she thinks about the worst. We then get to Chris and Alyssa. Chris thinks of an activity for the two of them to do, and Alyssa is having no parts of it. As Chris is getting ready to go snorkeling, Alyssa tells the producers that she saw Chris without his shirt on, and she finally admits that she's not physically attracted to him, which at this point is obvious from the first episode. While Chris is doing his thing, the producers are trying to talk to Alyssa, and at this point in the episode, she's crying, she's playing the victim, and she essentially wants to leave. And at this point, I think the show needs to go ahead and give Chris and Alyssa the divorce while sending Alyssa a bill for using the show for a free trip. What she's doing to Chris is beyond cruel, and what goes around comes around. Mark and Lindsey have what should have been a romantic nightly dinner, but Mark uses the time to tell Lindsey that he wants to take things slow and he wants things to flow organically. This comes after Mark the Shark willingly slept with Looney Lindsey, and judging by how Lindsey reacted, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't use protection. And Lindsey does a good job of holding things in, but it doesn't take Lindsey long to show her anger. And she does this by telling the world that Mark farts and he's clogged up the toilet in the past 3 days of their marriage. While it seems apparent that Mark has emotionally checked out, it appears that Lindsey is in fight or flight mode to prevent herself from getting hurt. And I sadly gotta side with Lindsey on this. While Mark is entitled to feel how he feels, he used the romantic dinner to essentially change things up on a woman who has issues with expressing emotions, and he thought it would be cool. Not at all. And finally, we have Olajuwon and Katina. The episode ends with Olajuwon laying it on thick with Katina, with rose petals on the bed, champagne, and hot oil foot massages. And he's letting Katina know that he is ready to take things to the next level with her. And by the next level, I mean that Olajuwon wants to crack her buns that night. The romantic gestures cause Katina to shed tears of joy, and the episode ends. On a scale of 1 to 10, I will give this episode a 5. While it did a better job of utilizing its time versus the last episode, this episode put a lot of drama on full display, and the only couple that I think has a prayer of making it past decision day is Steve and Noi. But I did enough talking for the night. How do you feel about my review or the episode? Feel free to leave a comment below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to reply to each and every one. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.